Welcome back to Big Fish in the Middle Kingdom. I'm Brendan Davis, your host. And as you can probably tell if you looked at the title of this episode, I have agonized over how to say this exactly, but it is time to officially put Big Fish in the Middle Kingdom to bed. Now, I had intended to record this wrap-up episode a couple of weeks ago, but circumstances and life demands and then a pretty wicked head cold conspired against my original plans. I'm mostly over the cold. I'm sure you can probably still hear a little bit of it. Hopefully it's not too bad. But I wanted to touch base on some things before I go and just say some stuff. I'm really proud of what we've done here. And by we, I mean, not to be corny, but I mean me, the guest, and you, the listener. Let's start with the guests first. The guests that I've had on this show have really put a human face on a diverse array of experiences. The main thing that I come away with from doing this show is that, this realization that expats and migrants come in all flavors, young, old, long-term, short-term, rich, poor, and everything in between. But we have featured such an amazing group of people on here. We've had entrepreneurs of all kinds, educators, entertainers. The guests have been a real who's who of kind of interesting people who've come to China, usually Beijing because I'm based here, to do something ambitious, unique, and sometimes a little bit crazy. That's kind of how I framed it all this time. And it's been a real pleasure to meet really everybody. A lot of these people have become friends or even business partners in some cases. And of course, their stories continue on, but our chats are frozen in time and they can always be accessed here. I'm going to keep the show catalog online forever. So you can always check it out if you're looking for someone with a cool story to tell and you want to listen to something. And of course, over time, this will be like a historical record in a way, depending on what people go on and do. As the show developed, it expanded to include what they call sea turtles, which are Chinese people who have left China to go usually be educated and sometimes work overseas and then come back to contribute to China's development. But I realized that those folks were better served on How China Works, the show that I co-created with Ying Li. And so a lot of those interviews are now found on that show. And as my own plans have shifted, as my film and TV career, which is really, what pays the bills, in theory, most of the time, and that's really what I do, as that has shifted to take me more and more outside of China, I had this realization that I need to have more of a global show, so it's not really sort of locked into China so specifically. And ironically, If I Knew You Better has included several Chinese expats to the U.S. So no matter where my travels and work in life take me or how active I am in dealing with the country here in China, I am sure that China is going to be a big part of my consciousness and life moving forward. So there will be more to come as far as China guests on If I Knew You Better. As I record this, though, I am preparing to move on in various ways. And as my own China focus has shifted, so does what I want to talk about and where I'll be finding people to do that talking with. So that's the me part of this. And as far as you, the listener, your encouragement has been a great motivator for me to make this as good as I could. We have never had huge numbers, but the show's reach is pretty fantastic. We currently track in 88 countries or territories. The web host Libsyn has kind of a funny way of breaking it all out. And I can see a summary and I can go through and look at individual pieces. There's enough controversy over Western views of China's naming convention, so I'll just leave that comment there. 88 countries or territories. And the places that are commonly spoofed by a VPN, like the US or the UK, are already well represented in the listenership. So that number is apparently pretty legit. But all good things must end. So it's time for me to sign off from here and make something great happen somewhere else, hopefully. So I really do hope that you'll join me for that. Before I bounce, though, I want to acknowledge a handful of the people who have helped make this show possible or make it as good as it could be in their own various ways. First of all, Carl King, my composer friend who did this music that I've come to know and love so much, and we have carried it over to How China Works. That was meant to be temporary, but as this show's ending and as there is a China theme in that show and in that music, that is a marriage that I'm going to keep intact. He had his friend Mike Stone, who is a fantastic drummer, play the drums on the track that he otherwise programmed and recorded, and I really appreciate Carl's efforts on that music. Ronald Paredes, my friend, who was also a previous show guest. He did the logo for this show, plus all of my other efforts, my other podcasts, and also my podcasting course on Udemy. My former assistant, Jiryuan Zhou, aka Lolliot, who really helped a lot with countless admin and other tasks in the early days of this show. She was really invaluable. Free Li Chan was also a big aid to those efforts for a hot minute when she worked with me at my old company. Also on the thank you list is my old friend Sherry Larson. We don't like to say how old because that really dates us, but she is formerly with the How Stuff Works Network and now iHeartMedia. Sherry has provided senior level industry pro feedback and unwavering encouragement that not only could I do this, but that I was good enough at it that I really should and I should continue. And I continue to keep her in my feedback loop whenever I can get her on the email. So as I keep developing the new show and expanding, I think her advice will continue to come in very handy. Kyle Mullen and Mike Wester of The Beijinger really supported the show and me in various ways, and they both sat down for very candid interviews as well. Those are still two of my favorite shows, so I really appreciate those guys being on here and also helping to support the podcast. My friend John Dietz of Bong Bong Pictures met me through the show and believed in me enough to give me an office at his company to do the show out of at a really crucial point in my own timeline, so I really appreciate you, John. Thanks for that. Mike Shaw included me in a big idea he had called Migration Media, and although our partnership wasn't ultimately built to last, it was a worthy effort, and I wish him very well however he continues to pursue it. I definitely want to thank Chrislyn Chu, who became a recurring guest and was a close collaborator both leading up to and during that time, and she continues to amaze me with her grace and insights in the work she's doing. She's a very special commentator and observer of life, and I love her work. I want to thank the many other returning champion guests, including, and this is a short list, I really racked my brain, Claudia Masugar, AJ Warner, Elliot Zagman, Fei Wu, James Lalonde, Jonathan Garrison, Kevin Geiger, and Ying Lee, who became close friends as well as colleagues in some cases, and in the case of Ying Lee, my co-host on How China Works, so you will continue to hear us together in that show. On an even more personal note, I want to thank my mom, Ellen, who is really the reason I'm here. And I don't mean in China, but I mean alive and having survived my childhood, along with my grandmother, her mother, Geneva, plus my mom's husband, Ray. They have been fantastic supports just to me in general in my life, and I love them very much. I also want to acknowledge my dad, William Clyde Davis, who died last month, 1 week short of what would have been his 81st birthday. We were not very close over the years, but we had really repaired the relationship in about the last decade or so. And I'm really glad that when I visited the U.S. earlier this year, I was able to go visit him. And at that time, he was really proud to let me know that he never missed an episode of this show. And he had the detailed recall of minutia from different interviews to prove it, which is a really good memory to leave with. And most of all, I want to thank my girlfriend, Susie Chen. She has not only supported the show from the very earliest days and always gave thoughtful and enthusiastic feedback whenever she could, but she shared her own really personal and moving life story on episode 89 that is still one of the most popular episodes of this show. If you haven't heard that one, check that out. Okay, as I'm winding this up, I want to say that there are many other people who've been a lot to me throughout this process, and there's no way I'm not forgetting at least a half dozen other folks that I really should mention, but I have to wrap it up eventually, so I'd better do it now. When you finish this episode, I hope you will search If I Knew You Better in your favorite podcatcher, or find it via the links in the show notes, and subscribe if you haven't done so already. I have some truly fascinating guests on that show now, and there are some really incredible stories coming up soon. So if you like this show, I know you'll like that one too. Okay, I think this is actually it now. Thank you for sticking with me on this for over 2 great years. Please keep digging through that archive and enjoy the shows that we created together. And if you want to see me next week, check out How China Works or If I Knew You Better. Peace.